reporting from London. Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Between the Headlines. I'm your host, Amina Taylor. Well, joining me tonight for their insightful commentary are two media professionals with minds all of their own. Allow me to introduce on my right, Timur Moon. He's a journalist. He works freelance alongside pages like The Times and The Telegraph. And alongside him, Ayo Johnson. He's a political analyst and broadcaster. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining us. There is something there, Ayo, about the PPP, the Pakistan People's Party, and then, of course, the PMLN version, it's there too, coming together. It's almost as if my enemy's enemy is my friend, but how much longer is that going to hold together?
Well, it will have to hold, because they've got no other choice. The two parties clearly have shown that they've won the elections, or on the way to winning. It's fantastic for democracy in Pakistan. The people have voted, and clearly they've been heard. And I think the two parties will have to form some form of coalition. Now, the problem is, what sort of pressure would they have from the United States? Don't forget that General Musharraf has been a man of the United States for some time, and they would like to see him making the decisions, and clearly if there are other parties who will be doing that for him or influencing those decisions that the United States would like to see go in a specific direction, then I can see a lot of pressure coming on these parties to ensure that they tug the line.
Well, the New York Times, they actually mention a little bit of what Ayo Johnson just touched on there. Pakistani voters crushed the party of Musharraf, and it says here, a defeat for the U.S. Timo, that's quite important, how America are seeing these elections. John Kerry's over there as an independent observer, and he's saying there have been irregularities on in some cases.
I think that perhaps there were, but the decision of the people, I think, was so clear-cut that there was no opportunity really to rig the elections as they have been in the past. And I would also add that given the return prior to her assassination in December of Benazir Bhutto, the former leader of the PPP, the US administration was, I think, trying to forge a sort of alliance between Musharraf and Benazir. So I wouldn't say that they're totally against the results here. I think there will be opportunities
this alliance,
given to work.
You have a point.
It's not just the alliance. The problems with Musharraf is that he took away the judiciary from the people. Now that judiciary would have to be reinstated. The judges would have to get back their jobs.
Some are on the house arrest as we speak.
Absolutely. So it's how all that fans in within the coalition, General Musharraf on one side, and how the general population sees it all. If Musharraf feels threatened, if he feels that he himself may be impeached, like some people are talking in some quarters, assuming we'll get a two-thirds majority within the coalition, then that could be trouble in that country.
We're talking about an ex-army man here, who's only last year relinquished his very great sways of, memorabilia and medallions and symbol and epaulets of power. But an army man, is he always an army man, Team? Or some of the papers are alluding to this. I
think he is, yes. And that's the thing with Pakistan is that the army, I think, will always be a major force and perhaps the dominant force in the country. One thing that's notable again about these elections is the falling away of support for the religious right. The religious parties, which in previous years had seemed to be resurgent. Here I think we are seeing the historically democratic parties, despite their perhaps taintedness with corruption, seeing a resurgence.
In this, Ayo, Benazir Bhutto's widow, Asif Ali Zardari, he's made a lot of the people's grief, the outpouring of emotion when it came to his late wife's death. Do you think that's been mixed up, perhaps overwhelmingly so, in a matter of politics? Have we gotten emotive votes rather than politically sound votes?
Well, it doesn't really matter, the fact that the votes have come in. But in saying that, I do believe that there's been some compassionate voting in behalf of the great lady herself once she passed. But again, when you think about the way she died, the temperature, the leading on to the elections themselves, I think clearly the population in Pakistan have spoken, and we must respect that, be it emotionally or not.
All right, a story here that has great resonance across the world. We've been hearing today that Cuban president, the man who came to power over 49 years ago, Fidel Castro, has resigned. He's officially relinquished all power. He stepped down not just as head of the army, but he's also stepped down as the head of the government. Timur, he hasn't been seen in public for 19 months. His brother Raul has effectively been in control for some argue a longer period than that 19 months. This hasn't been a surprise, has it?
No, this has certainly been in the offing for, well, at least 2 years. He's, I mean, there are people who doubt that he even is still alive. I think he's at least been on life support for 2 years. He hasn't been seen in public. His speeches are now issued as text statements. This is not a surprise at all. But then, on the other hand, it is the end of an era. It's been formally sort of accepted.
How are you reading that, Ayo? Because here is a man who defined not just an era, but helped to define a region in terms of politics.
Yes, communism, socialism, all of that. That's what that era depicts. But he's gone. But we've got to look at the pluses of what he's left behind. Clearly, we have mortality rates really down. We've got GDP per capita in terms of teachers and doctors at the all-time high, to the extent that they're now exporting teachers and doctors around the world. Something has worked. Now, the so-called Washington consensus to say that we've got to impose the democracy on that nation to follow a specific set of ways. Who's to say that our brand of democracy would work in that environment? So we've got to look at the pluses as to how communism has worked to an extent, and the failures of that, and seeing how we can reverse that.
Timur, I've been to Cuba on a number of occasions, and I've always found the place warm and friendly, but undoubtedly there are signs of economic strife. There are signs that there are people who are living in a particular way that would have been aided by having some kind of relation with America had that still stood. People argue that with Castro handing aside power, it's now time for the capitalists to come in. It's not going to be as easy and as simple as that, is it?
I don't think it is. I mean, what's interesting is the international reaction. I think the US has been kind of a little bit frosty and perhaps doubts. I mean, Castro himself was saying that the transition that he's speaking of is not a transition to democracy. The Europeans, I think, have been more enthusiastic, but as Ayo says, rates of like healthcare and education there's been a very high level, but given, obviously the US trade embargo has hit Cuba hard over the past 50 years, and mass unemployment. You know, you see sort of highly qualified doctors and lawyers driving taxis.
Yes, which can't bode well for their future. On a note on this, he's survived 9 American presidents, countless assassinations, some of it state-sanctioned. Is he having the last laugh, or is America having the last laugh on this one?
That's a tall one. It's possible that he can have the last laugh.
Because he said, I've chosen when to go. You haven't removed me.
And besides, his ideology still stays. He's picked someone who can follow in his footsteps. He's still maintained the so-called one-party system. But we've got to look at the pluses, the fact that life expectancy, health, education, things that we take for granted in other parts of the world where people die for no apparent reason due to poor health, have been extremely high in Cuba. And the American brand, I don't think would work in Cuba. I think the Cubans themselves have been in that sort of setup for too long and have shown to have resolved a lot of their problems. But again, inequality, justice, human rights, all the things that we're talking about.
All right.